Welcome back to Core Motivations Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Connolly. I'm a certified Enneagram coach and a Symbis marriage coach. Hey, if this is your first time here, I want to give you a special welcome. You have stumbled upon an incredible community. And for those returning, thanks again for not only committing to yourself, but committing to growth through this podcast and the information shared. So last week, how did it go for you? What did you think about our time together? You see, because I had a lot of fun. It was fun to share more about my story and my journey and the things that I've been doing in my life. Okay, I did say that I would give you updates along the way as we change or make our big zip code change. Well, we are officially in contract, meaning we liked the house and we made an offer and they accepted. How exciting! Well, that's what everyone says and even expects you to think. Don't get me wrong, this is an incredible gift and an opportunity. And I am ever so grateful that we've been blessed with this. And I certainly am not taking that for granted. But since I have been to this rodeo before, and maybe you have too, the buying house rodeo, then you all know the stuff that comes with it. Now, multiply that by a bazillion, and you got my headspace. See, I found it mostly easy to move across the state or even to another town. But out of the state, it's a whole other animal. All the things you have to coordinate all at the same time. And gosh, it's got me spinning. And we're in constant contact with our realtors, mortgage companies, and we're what's called escrow. If you know, you know. Don't forget the part where trying to get our current house put together and on the market to sell while we pack and be ready to show the house while taking care of the other aspects of life. Oh, and did I mention my amazing husband is doing all this while working a full time job? Mine, of course, it's a little bit more flexible. Anyways, our Operation Move Out of the State updates in a nutshell. We are in contract, we're in escrow, and we're packing, making plans to move, figuring out all the dates, lining everything up, signing lots of papers, and so it goes on until the final signature, the keys, and the move out date, which we're really looking forward to. And I can't wait to share all those things coming up. You know, as I was thinking about what we would talk about this week, I find I've been reflecting a lot on relationships. How do you know that the people that you're connected with are healthy and a good match for who you are and where you are in life? And then, of course, vice versa. Recently I asked a friend to help with something. And while I was asking for what I needed, what I realized is that there was no room in her life to help me with my need. Like I just didn't fit. And nowhere in there did she think about me, or so it seemed. I had lots of thoughts and lots of feelings about what happened in that situation. And it's really hard to say out loud, but I'm going to do it anyway because that's what this time is all about. I'm experiencing more and more people that are too busy or too tired or whatever it is to find time to be a friend or to connect with family. Maybe you're experiencing this too. But what I want to know is, why do you suppose that this is happening? Sometimes I think it's leftovers from the pandemic experience, but really, I think we have just forgotten about what's important. Or maybe our individual capacity is just plain small. I don't know. Maybe it's something else. What do you think? Now, you know, one of my fave podcasters and authors, Mel Robbins, I really have to say how much I appreciate the research she does and all the people that she's connected with, doctors that she's connected with, and lots of other people. And often she talks about topics that we all might be thinking about, but we're just not talking about it. Well, so she did a really great episode about this very thing that I'm talking about the differences in relationships and friendships. And in front of that, talking about those differences between men and women and how we relate to each of those friendships and relationships in different ways. The style type of friendships, for example, with men, as they talked about in Mel's podcast, is that they tend to connect with people from a different level of intimacy, if you will, where they find the friendships from within larger groups, where women tend to be more of a one to one style of friendship. What draws us into these relationships or aids in seeking these relationships for women, and that it's not specific, keeping in mind, to all women and all men, but women tend to seek these three things in relationship or from them, known as symmetry, support, and secrecy. Now, I'm going to stop right there and encourage you to listen to her podcast, and you'll find out what those three things mean and how they apply to friendships and relationships. The podcast is called It's Not You, The Real Reason Adult Friendship is So Hard, and 3 Ways to Make It Easier. It's truly worth a listen, so go check it out. I'll post a link to her YouTube, or you can find her on Apple Podcasts in the show notes. You can see that. So, why bring this up? So glad you asked. As we are taking inventory, not just of our home and all the things in it, I personally am taking inventory in regards to my relationships with family and friends. And I find myself in what feels like unfamiliar territory. I guess in a way, I'm referencing to the brokenness in relationships and being mismatched with people you believe are your friends. I find I struggle with the relationships in my life, from family to friends and all those in between. Now, it is super easy on either side to blame people because they are rude, mean, unkind, or my favorite, that it is just the way they are and they're never going to change. Suck it up and move on, or whatever descriptive adjective you put in there. Or from your broken self lens, which is to blame yourself, saying, I'm rude, I'm mean, I'm unkind, and that is the way I am, blah, 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 blah kind of person. And perhaps even further, I deserve this treatment. This reminds me of the time, just kidding. Not sure either of those are the best way to approach as you try to understand what's happening in relationships and friendships and causing what feels like a divide. So, what I'm seeking to share is that this is important. And it's important because we need to identify where we are in our life to take our temperature. Are you on a path of health, a path of breaking family curses, trying to be the best version of yourself, or just fine where you're at? Now, I'm not saying that this is necessarily a good or a bad thing because this is a no judgment zone. So, this could be for good or for bad, however you perceive it. So, what am I getting at? Gosh, I guess it's almost 18 years ago, I met who would be my friend at church. No, not you, Phil. Haha. See, we became fast friends. I needed this friendship. I was in a difficult place in my life, and somehow I was like that abandoned dog that got left by their owner. I was in some ways malnourished, hungry for connection, needing love and kindness and respect, and even to be nurtured. So this person gave that to me and even helped me to draw closer to God. And I was so grateful for that friendship. But as time went on, and a small detail, but equally important, we no longer lived near each other. So that made our friendship harder. But what I found was I was carrying this friendship. I was the one that made the calls. I was the one that planned the visits. And I was the one that kept doing the things to keep the relationship and friendship going and alive. And sometimes I would hear from this friend, "Thank you for calling me because I just am not good at calling. I forget to do that." Or, and this one kind of bothers me, "My life is too busy." Not what this person was actually saying about my life or what I was doing wasn't important. They weren't saying that. But through my Enneagram 2 lens, that's what I heard, that I wasn't important to them, that I wasn't worth calling, or that their life was just so busy that there was no room for me. And I know that this person is kind and has a gentle soul and cares so deeply for so many people, and that they desire to have connection. But maybe what the truth is that we both outgrew that friendship. And I personally, I needed more out of maybe that friendship, but just friendship specifically. So by showing up for myself, I realized that that friend was not showing up for me. And I know I deserve that. I deserve someone that would show up for me. And I deserve to be treated just like I treat others. So, I kind of want to briefly talk about what it looks like when a two lives from their healthy side. And remember, I'm an Enneagram 2. I talk about it a lot. So, when I'm living from that place of health, what it looks like is that I, or any two, set and respect boundaries. See, a healthy two understands that self care is essential, that we're able to say no without guilt, and that it's okay to protect our energy from being completely drained by others' demands. Or maybe demonstrating health comes from being in touch with our own needs or a two's needs specifically. And it looks like that a two has learned, or me, myself, I have learned to listen to my own emotional and physical needs, that I'm giving myself the same care and consideration that I would offer to others. And that this allows a two to approach relationships from a place of strength, not dependency. And this, of course, then it fosters this authentic, deeper, more genuine connection. It creates a space, this healthy space of having balanced relationships. So the connections are based on mutual respect and shared care rather than a dynamic where the two is constant, indispensable helper. And that what it looks like, again, for healthiness or in health is that a two finds worth outside of those relationships, which I love because we're seeking the type 4 in our Enneagram. And the type 4 has this strong sense of self, and they realize their value isn't tied to how much they do for other people. So when a 2 is healthy, they're drawing from that aspect of a 4, that they're learning and living in this direct and assertiveness. And something that they draw from an 8 is that they are also asserting their own needs and less reliant on indirect and manipulative tactics, which sometimes 2s can do. Now, maybe some of these things will speak to your heart and help you to seek these healthy, showing up ways for yourself. And I'm sure you can relate with this part, that I am a work in progress. Maybe you are too. That we're always striving to achieve these healthy additions and perspectives and ways to aid in our self care, our rhythms and patterns. Now, I know relationships are difficult, but if relationships are worth having, aren't they also worth the work? I personally believe we are meant to be and live in community. So that means we need each other. So, how can you create healthy rhythms and patterns of self care out of the things that we learned today? Well, how about being brave enough to say, "Excuse me, I need you to stop what you're doing and what you're saying because it's not okay for me." And that is your responsibility to take care of yourself, right? So, what happens if that person doesn't listen or they don't stop? Well, guess what? You're an adult. You get to decide what happens next, and from a healthy headspace. So, you can choose to walk away. You can choose to try another way of asking. You can choose to say what you need and then give space for that person to process what you're asking. Or maybe you have other ways that work for you that are healthy. But the bottom line is that when you're showing up for yourself, you're setting the standard for what you expect in your life from yourself and from others. So that means that we have to show up for ourselves first. And we've talked about these tools before, But just a quick reminder for all of us. Let's start with this. Showing up for ourselves means that we're caring for our emotions by acknowledging and being present with our feelings. Well, in the past, maybe you've suppressed them. I know that I have, or even ignored them. But guess what? Today, you can change that. And you can change that by challenging that negative self talk. When we're aware of that inner dialogue and redirect that negative judgment towards constructive, positive affirmation, that previously talked about inner committee that's always trying to convince us of something that seems like it could be true, but in actuality, it's not. And it's not healthy. So, how do we combat that? How do we turn that negative self talk? How do we challenge it? Well, guess what? We can thank the inner committee and tell them, this time I got it. Thank them for their time and commitment, but you're good. Now, this might seem like an easy thing, but often something that is forgotten is that we have the power to change that. But often something that is forgotten. And this is something that we can do towards showing up for ourselves. And that is to maintain your environment by keeping your living space tidy and organizing to contribute to better mental health. And finally, acknowledge your progress. Recognize where you currently are and make conscious choices that align with your values and goals. Well, that's it for today. I'm so glad that you joined me here today to talk about all these things, hear about my updates, and talk about ways to show up and things that are happening in friendships and family ships that maybe we need to reevaluate. Check out the show notes for the link to Mel Robbins' podcast and YouTube, and meet me back here next week. Okay, the legal stuff. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute professional advice. This podcast is not a substitute for medical care. The materials, movies, videos, or books referred to in this podcast are recommendations only. The views expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the podcast host. That's me, or sponsors. Join me each week as we dive into all things Enneagram, self care ideas, self love patterns and rhythms, share ideas from other reputable authors, doctors, and my favorite podcasts and my favorite podcasters. A big thank you to you for being here with me today on Core Motivations Podcast. I know you've heard me say this so many times before, but truly, thanks for supporting our podcast, as it just couldn't be done without all of you. So hit the follow button, share this episode with somebody, and please leave a review. You can find me, Michelle, on Instagram at core_motivations_coach or through email, Michelle at coremotivationscoach.com. So let me leave you with this. Until next time, and as always, I'm rooting for you.